Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, a show for people who are obsessed with all things marketing. I'm your host, Veronica, Romney, certified master marketer, international keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and the author of a new book called Identity Marketing. Each week, I interview rainmakers from brands big and small to pull back the curtain on what's actually working in marketing today. We dig into real-life wins and losses and their very real consequences, and get into spicy discussions of marketing controversies and opposing philosophies. This is the real marketing thought leadership you've been looking for in your ears on demand. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. Welcome back to the Rainmaker Podcast. My next guest, Michelle Morgan, is kind of a PPC legend. I mean, she started in the industry in 2010. She's won the SMX Speaker of the Year award in 2018. She was named the #1 most influential PPC expert from PPC Hero in 2020. And she's a Lego nerd and former collegiate golfer. And you'll hear her personality. You'll hear her tip, her #1 tip on getting external clients to buy into the strategy. We also talked about internal buy-in with ourselves. We talked about what pisses her off right now, what makes me mad right now. It was like, for just having met to record this episode, it was actually wildly refreshingly open and honest. And I have to thank Michelle for that. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, Michelle Morgan. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you. Okay, so I kind of shared this before we officially pushed record that you're kind of a PPC legend. You've gotten all of the things, the awards, the accolades, your peers respect the shit out of you. Got it. Resume aside. But the thing that I like to do with my guests, or I try to ask is what pisses you off right now? What are you so mad about? Because that's really when you're two marketers talking real, it's usually venting across the dinner table or in a hallway at a conference, or I don't know. It's when I'm with my friends, we're being really real about what's going on. You're an agency owner, you're a writer, you're a speaker, you're a consultant, you got your hand in lots of things. And so I'm going to ask you, we're recording this on the conclusion of 2024. It'll probably play at the beginning of next year.
Sure.
What makes you mad? What's bothering you right now in our space amongst our peers?
Yeah, totally. I really think it comes down, most of the things that make me mad on a daily basis, I think, are just when people do a bad job and they think that they're really good at marketing and they're just not. I'm not going to say that I do everything right. I've always said, if anybody ever audits one of my accounts, they will invariably find something that they would do different. Everybody manages accounts differently, but just makes me mad when people overpromise, underdeliver, all that sort of thing, because then we're left to clean up what is the agency client relationship, because now they've been burned. Yeah. They don't trust anybody. And it's hard to sit there and constantly prove yourself when even the metrics look good. So it's just those type of people who set other agencies up for failure are just real frustrating.
In my agency days, I just remember always being guilty until proven innocent. I was always the recipient of past trauma. I was always the recipient of past provider drama. Mm-hmm. And I just really grew tired of having that dynamic be against me, not for me, in entering these new kind of agency client relationships. But it's interesting whether I'm an agency owner or I'm a marketing consultant or I'm in a service, literally when I'm in a provider capacity, inevitably other people's past hurt or letdowns will surface. And I'm not a therapist and I'm not in the business of mindset and I'm not a life coach.
Yep.
But it's interesting because the more you get into client work, the more you realize that skill is a requirement to make it.
Totally.
Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. You end up having to make them feel comfortable with the advertising they asked you to do in the first place, which is very strange. Some of my past coworkers and I used to also say that we got into this to be advertisers. We didn't realize we had to be business consultants and business therapists, because not only do people say, I want to advertise, but then they say, should I advertise or should I put money over here? It's I don't want to coach you out of my job, but I don't know what makes the most sense for your business. I don't manage your business. So you have to tell me to some degree. But if people have constantly been asking for more, I mean, one of the things that always comes to me is that whenever I'm on any sort of pre-qualification call, talking to anybody about if we might even be the right fit in general, it seems like everybody clams up when you get to the question of, what's your budget? because they think you're out to get it. It's like, I'm trying to see if you have enough to support the goals that you just told me you have.
Yes.
I don't make money on how much you spend on Google. That's not how we charge. So it doesn't make sense to me that way. But yeah, we end up being therapists and trying to talk them into things and make sure that they feel safe and comforted, which is important, but also that's not my strength.
I know. That's really funny. Yeah, you ask somebody their budget, and it's like you're asking them like their pant size or bra size. Like I didn't realize it was so triggering. I'm so sorry.
Yes. Yes.
That's funny. That's really funny. The psychology there. Okay, this is actually a really interesting point, and I think you and I can get like really meaty with this, which is the concept around buy-in. But here's where I'm going with this. There's two forms of buy-in. Mm-hmm. There's getting buy-in from your external humans, right? Your clients, your colleagues, your business partner, your life partner, your kids, who like it's the person across from you that you're trying to get buy-in for. And then the second point of buy-in is buy-in for yourself. How do I get Veronica to buy into Veronica, especially if I'm contemplating doing my own thing and taking the risk of entrepreneur? I mean, like, it's really interesting. So let's start with the external buy-in, because you are prolific in your career. You've done this for a really long time. You've worked with a caliber of humans and you've had different service providing capacities. So like, let's talk about external buy-in first before we dive into like the meaty, like us buy-in.
Sure.
So have you noticed when working with others, like what's Michelle's go-to move when it comes to getting people to buy in?
Oh, I'm going to be giving away everything.
It's like your swagger.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. What's funny is it's exactly that. It's me usually saying, listen, you want to do this. This is how it has to happen. I'm not going to tell you any promised numbers. I just won't. I'm not going to give you any numbers up ahead. I'm not going to tell you that all of these things are going to work. I'm going to tell you what we're going to do is set a benchmark, and that I'm going to work with you to try and beat it. That's it. If you don't want me to do that, go someplace else. If somebody else is promising you 1,000% ROAS, killer. Go with them. That's great. That's not what I do. I'm just going to try and do what we've been doing, make it better, try and advertise your business better. And most often, the people who end up being really good partners hear that, and they understand that we might hit 1,000% ROAS on the first test we run. We could. It's, not out of the realm of possibility. But they also understand that I'm not promising anything. Like, I promise to try, I promise to work with them, I promise to be a good partner, but that's about it. And the people who have good relationships and are easy to work with, they get that and they hear that. The people who don't want that and they just want the numbers and they don't really think about the working relationship and stuff, they leave, which is great, because then I don't have to work with people that I don't want to work with and that don't mesh well with me, because I'm not going to give them promises. So I don't have to live up to something that I've said, because all I did was promise to try. So
your style is an intervention.
Like,
listen, you're the problem, not me. And I'm just going to give it to you real talk. If you come to me with this, I'm not enabling you like other agencies have enabled you.
Right.
Like, this is literally like a PPC intervention. And man, you like, even in this podcast, you delivered it with fire. I was like, whoop.
More often than not, those end up being more like, I think a lot of people would see it as like a pre-qualification or like a sales call, if you will, of trying to figure out like, okay, how can I land this client? It's more often like, what can I say that is probably going to scare them away, that I'm going to say a year into the relationship, 6 months into the relationship, and then they're going to be something that I've spent a lot of time building up and don't get to see any of the results from. And then they're going to feel burned by yet another agency. So what can I say ahead of time that actually scares people off, rather than just trying to close everything? So it's kind of actually stealing a little bit from some of our lead generation content and generating good quality leads. You scare off the low quality leads. It's on purpose. You do that on purpose. And then the people that you end up working with are great.
That's like psychologically fascinating. That's really interesting that's really interesting. Because that is the whole point of good marketing. Good marketing attracts, but also like kindly detracts, right?
Exactly.
Like it should do both simultaneously to the wrong person and the right person.
If you market to everybody, you market to nobody.
Yes.
So
yes. Yes. And so that's really interesting. Actually, I kind of want to borrow that. That's a really good
You can have it.
Well, because it's a spicy take. It's an unapologetic, conviction-filled conversation, which I feel like this is a conversation I've had with Jay Acunzo, who I really love.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great speaker. He's really good at drawing out people's unique intellectual property and frameworks. But his whole thing too is conviction. Conviction. We don't need more watered down anything.
No.
Like either you have conviction behind what you're doing, how you do it,
Yep.
or you don't. And I think the fact that you're like, no, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to be radically honest because I know where this is going to go if I don't.
Right.
That's like one of the most courteous, relationship oriented things that you can do.
Yes.
Like it's like entering a romantic relationship. Like I want to have kids. You don't want to have kids. Why are we wasting our time?
Then
like
what
it's
are we
just
doing
really
here?
upfront.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's honest to a point of not being disparaging for the other point of view.
Correct.
But if we're not going to meet in the middle anywhere, what's the point in trying the other stuff? You know?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct. Okay. Now let's talk about buy-in inside, because you're one of those that decided to cut the umbilical cord. Mm-hmm. You jumped out, you started your own company, you're doing your own thing, living life on your own terms. I know that too well.
Yep.
I also know the pros and cons and the dark night of the soul and the despair and all the things that come with that inherent risk. How did you buy yourself into this then? And if you were to do it again tomorrow, how would you have bought yourself into this tomorrow? Like, I really would love, like, that's the advantage of wisdom. Mm-hmm. How you got yourself here in the first place. Take me to that moment. But if I had to do it for myself again tomorrow, how would I do it? You know, like,
sure.
Tell me that.
Yeah. So I think what helped me a lot is that I had a lot of support from people in the industry. I had a lot of friends who had already done it. And they kind of said, like, just go do it. Just go do your own thing. And that, I think that really helped. So that gave me a lot of confidence in that. I'm not usually one to lack for confidence, but I also am a real tightwad when it comes to stuff. Oh my God, it's happening again. Yep, happened again. But I know where I am. Said tightwad. Can you still hear me?
I can.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So then we'll keep going. But I am a real tightwad when it comes to stuff. So I was never going to do anything until I felt like extremely financially secure, because that's just the personality type that I have. I've just always been that way. So I think that's how I got there, is I just kind of said, okay, I need to make it so I have a safety net. I'll be fine. My friends think it'll be fine. But I also had somebody who constantly told me, he was like, you know, if you leave and you try something and you fail, do you think you can get a job somewhere else? I was like, probably. It's like, then just do it. So like, if you can get a job someplace else, why wouldn't you? Like, just go with it. Just make the leap. So I did. Worked out really great. Again, those friends in the network very much helped. I had a lot of people sending business my way whenever I first started, all that sort of thing. So that was extremely helpful. But then I think probably in terms of what I would do if I were going to do it again now, I think I wouldn't need as big of a bit of a nest egg in there. I think I would just make the leap sooner, knowing that things would be fine. I think I was trying to have a certain amount of security so that I knew that if nothing else, I could just kind of wallow for a bit. And I think I would just do it. Like, I was in, what was it? Mid-30s, something like that. That's still pretty young. You can recover from anything in that range, I think. So I think that would probably what I would be, just do it a little bit sooner and not feel like I had to be quite so secure in what I needed to do. Trust my friends a little more.
Yeah, that's interesting. Mm. Can you not hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, great.
Yep.
No, that's okay. First of all, and I know this quote gets like overused and misquoted and stolen from everybody. So
did Oscar Wilde say it?
Yeah, right. Yeah, Maya Angelou. That's the one.
Or Abraham Lincoln. One of them.
Yes. Yeah. But just that, like, you know, you want to change your life, change your circle, like basically change who you put yourself amongst. And so I think that was one thing. Entrepreneurship can be very, very, very isolating and lonely if you're not careful. Mm-hmm. And so having that circle of influence, circle of friendship, circle of support is wildly advantageous, especially when you're going through it. It's funny, I'm going to liken marriage to entrepreneurship in the sense of, like, one of my favorite marital quotes was like, the average person gets married 7 times. You just get to decide if it's with the same person or not. Mm.
Interesting.
And I find entrepreneurship to be very similar.
Yes.
Like the average entrepreneur goes through like 7 iterations of entrepreneurship. We get to decide what those eras are, or whatever those albums get to be of that specific chapter. That's probably the one thing I didn't anticipate about entrepreneurship, because my parents had an air conditioning company for 33 years and never deviated off the script.
Yep.
I have had a new album, quote unquote album, of my entrepreneurial journey almost every like 2 years on average.
Yes, I'm in the same boat.
Okay, so can we talk about that? Because it's like even though I had a lot of great entrepreneurial friends and mentors and I think examples, I don't think I was mentally prepared for the amount of pivoting or the amount of reinvention that is required when in the business of self versus the consistency a company would provide because they're determining the rules. What have you found? What has been your experience there?
So what's interesting is I actually discovered that pattern of kind of every 2 years, not sticking so specific to it toward the end, but like in the first 6 to 8 years of my career when I did work for other people, I had the safety net of working for other people, but I worked in-house for 2 years. I kind of got bored. So then I went to an agency, and then after 2 years, I'd kind of gotten my feet under me, and then I felt like I could step up and lead more and do more content. So I had the same job, but in a different capacity, and I had a different passion part of it that I was focusing on. And then, a couple of years after that, I think at that point I was managing people. So then I was learning how to manage people. And then a couple of years after that, we started our YouTube channel. And then that was like a new thing that went into it. But I do feel like every couple years I hit a point where I need something that feels new, even if my job has not fundamentally changed in the past 14 years. Like I still manage Google Ads accounts, Facebook accounts, all this kind of stuff. I still try to get as good a performance out of it as I can, but I have to find something new in it or I get really burnt out. And I definitely feel a lag until I find that like new passion part of it.
I wonder if that is like the novelty thing, right? Like, because I know that your brain rewards us with dopamine for being introduced to novel, new, unique, unconventional things.
Totally.
But I've never heard it said the way that you just said it, which is like almost like a cure for burnout. Like you can, like I've certainly been a marketer for 17 plus going on. I mean, this is the longest relationship besides my marriage that I've been in, right? And I still love it. But you're right. If I was still doing email marketing at ancestry.com, I think I would like scream, right?
Yes.
If I was still doing I was an SEO PPC account manager at an agency. Like if I was still doing that specific thing, I would no longer have passion for the work that I'm doing.
Yep.
But it's the novelty, that dopamine hit that I get with this reinvention or a new role or a new responsibility that helps you sustain in the game without frying out, right?
Totally.
Fascinating. Interesting. Okay. So question, because other people were instrumental in your story. I believe that you are now one of those instrumental people for others.
I hope so.
So what is it that especially as we walk into this brand new year, I think 2024 was a challenge to say the least. It was also very politically stifling. It was just it was just hard. Fear was the winner of 2024. Fear of all things. 2025 is a new opportunity, new season of life where we get to kind of rewrite the narrative. People are also still desirous of doing their own thing. What would you mentor? What would you coach? What would you prescribe for the you of today that's looking at you for some counsel and example?
That's a good question. I think
I try.
That's why you host a podcast, right? You got all the questions. I think probably, so taking it from like what I would tell my past self, I think is that listen to your friends. First of all, get your friends. Like
get the right ones.
Be active in the industry. I had the good fortune to join the actual first ever PPC chat on Twitter back in the day. I remember it was like 7 p.m. on a Tuesday or something. And I was like, I have to join this. I have to do it because I think this is good. So I developed a really good network that way. I think I've had a lot of luck. I've fallen into a lot of this type of thing. But I think making sure that you're having like genuine relationships with those people on social, like obviously don't go out and like give all your personal information and stuff. But when it comes down to it, those are the relationships that have sustained my career and have led me a lot of places. I mean, the reason I got my agency job is because of the relationships I made on Twitter. And then I tried to repost it for somebody else to apply for the job. And they're like, why don't you apply? I was like, I don't think I can. They're like, you can. I saw your answers. So like just engaging with those people and being, I don't know, trying to find those folks out there who are smart. I would like to say that every industry is the same as paid advertising, but I don't know. I'm not in them. But it is full of very wonderful people who only want the best for not only the industry, but the people in it, because that's how you make an industry good. So having those relationships, I think, is one of the biggest parts that kind of moved me forward and has ended up making the path of my career what it is.
That's really important. Okay, but on the flip side, you have to be really careful too, because like not everybody, not all coaches are created equal. Not all mentors will not project their own stuff on you.
Yes.
Right. And so how do you discern between giving the right counsel to the person that's receiving it versus, overly sharing what you personally went through? Because not every journey is the same, and you don't want to negate wisdom earned, but also you don't want to assume that your road will be my road. Like, how do you litmus test yourself? How do you?
That's a good question. I think I probably am, because I think I do that with some of I'll relate it to account management, because that feels a little more like an easier path for me to talk through. Is that I think there are some times where I've been in a situation and I've been running campaigns a certain way for a long time, and then I read that other people are doing it a different way. I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then I try to look at who wrote it and how prolific they are, and then who's commenting on it and who's discussing it and who's making presentations about it at conferences, that sort of thing. So kind of what's in the zeitgeist about that thing. And then there's a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I guess I hadn't thought of it that way. That makes more sense. Maybe I am being a bit of a stick in the mud since I feel like I've been in this role for a while. I've gotten set in my ways. I think it just comes around trying to have multiple sources of input. Having one line of truth is never going to be like the best way to go about anything. So the more inputs you have, I think the better to a certain point. But you'll get to a point, at least with relationships and mentors, that kind of stuff, where your spidey senses will probably tell you if somebody's out for your best interest or theirs, or if they're just trying to stroke their ego and tell you about what they think that you should do, that sort of thing. Those things usually come with an underlying ick factor that I know at least a bunch of us girls will know about, but I don't know if some of the guys will quite as much. But, just listen to your gut on that sort of thing. If it feels like it's for you, good. If it doesn't, maybe it's not, Well,
that's what's interesting is I think a lot of us maybe run away from having to listen to ourselves. And so we bury ourselves in just another certification, another thing, another, what is it? A wall of knowledge, right? Just we just keep amassing all of this external validation of some kind, when really the only accreditation that we need is our own intuition.
Totally.
Right? And some of the giants that created life-changing businesses and brands, they were not business acumen humans. No. They just were intuitive, and they just kind of trusted themselves. But the problem with that is when you fail, it's all on you that you did that. You did it to yourself.
Well, I mean, that's what it comes down to, just entrepreneurship in general and taking a leap. Yes. You can really drive yourself into the ground. You hear about those really successful people because they are really successful. But first of all, moderately successful people, if you're not in digital advertising, you have no idea who I am. You just don't. I consider myself a successful human being, and I've been entrepreneurial, but I'm never going to be on the cover of a magazine. Sure. I'm not going to be a household name. It's just not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that that's not success. I think a lot of people also try to 10x stuff all the time. It's a buzzword that I hate. But then you're not necessarily going to end up doing that. And then they feel like if you don't do that, then you're a failure. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense either.
Yeah. And I think what a great reminder to redefine success for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we do this cool thing on the podcast where the last question is for you to put me on the hot seat to ask whatever it is that you'd like. So I'll let you ask the last question.
I actually really like the first question that you asked me. So I want to know
which was
what you're pissed off about right now.
Oh, I was like, what did I say? What did I say? Well, I have this condition. It's not medical, but I just feel like I have this thing where like I somewhat black out when I'm like talking or coaching, and they're like, "Oh, V, slow down. What'd you say?" I'm like, I don't remember what I said.
I don't know where I was.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was just I was present. I was in the moment. What pisses me off right now? That's a really good question.
I told you got good questions.
Real talk.
Yep.
This is not the bulk of what I do, but every once in a while I'll take on private clients. And honestly, the reason that I'm pissed off is I'm pissed off with myself. Let me just executive summary up front. I'm mad at me. So like, I'm going to tell you the story and you'll be like, oh, this client's a jerk, but it's really not. It's not their problem. I'm mad at myself. So I have recently worked with a client who is trying to, bring a book out into the world and like really put himself out there in this pursuit of thought leadership. And slowly through the course of time, I've seen an evolution occur, and it came to a place where I'm like, what? The original reason why you set out to do this has now changed so many times that I really call to question your sincerity. Because when and this is really, I want people to pay very close attention to this. This is to me a red flag. It's pay attention when this happens, because it happens with agency clients, it happens with personal branding clients, it happens with anybody.
Yep.
If you notice that the person you seek to serve, their why constantly is changing, immediate red flag. Something's wrong. In this scenario, what I've come to realize wasn't that the passion was behind the message. The passion is behind being famous. Yep. And it could also be for clients, like they don't really care about what they're selling. They just want to make a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
Like, okay. But no one says that, because that's an asshole thing to say.
Totally.
So no one's going to say it in that manner, but that's really the truth of the situation. And so like, I just started to notice that the evolution of this individual was him just seeking anything, any positioning, any framing that would get him to fame overnight. And the reason that I'm pissed off isn't that people desire vanity and fame. The reason I'm pissed off is because how did I not discern that from the very beginning?
Sure.
Because I am somebody who prides herself on being a good judge of character, reading between the lines, having a bullshit detector, insert whatever.
Sure.
And so the fact that I have now worked with someone for such a period of time where I'm like, how did I not see this from and mind you, it's not like they wanted me to see that, but still, like, how did I not read between the lines sooner?
Yeah.
I'm really frustrated with myself, because when you've been in the business for quite some time, for decades, like you don't want to pay ignorance tax. So when I have to pay ignorance tax, I get really mad.
Yep. Totally.
And that's something that I just want to like share vulnerably, that like, even when you've done this for a long time and you've earned your 10,000 hours of mastery, you still have learning curves, you still have growth edges, you still have mistakes that you have to confront.
Totally. Yeah. And that definitely rings a bell for me, because I know from past experience, agency life, in the current role that I'm in, that sort of thing, a category of business that I don't love working with, I will, but it's getting more and more narrow, is any sort of startup that doesn't really know what they're doing. But because what they're doing is effectively trying to get acquired by somebody, they're trying to be clever enough for long enough to get acquired. Again, that's not bad. But from a marketer perspective, from somebody who now owns a quote agency, that's hard, because we're effectively chasing awareness and sales and all this stuff. But the end goal is actually sale of the company,
acquisition,
and then they're gone in 6 months because they got acquired. So we're working extremely hard to hit some really tough metrics just for them to go someplace else really quickly. So those are tough things to have in there. Like it took me a long time to learn that lesson. So I definitely hear you when it comes down to not noticing something early enough. I hear that.
Well, and it's the opposite of what I've heard you say you stand for, and I know that I certainly stand for, which is relationship over transaction.
Yeah.
And so, yes, like those type of transactional behaviors or transactional like dynamics is just not like after so long in the game, it's just not fun anymore.
No, there are plenty of people out there who will do it. I would prefer not to be one of them.
Well, what a perfect way to snap that up at the end. Oh, mic drop right at the end. Michelle, thank you for being on today's Rainmaker podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening today. If you've loved what you heard, make sure to rate the show, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us get the Rainmaker podcast in front of more passionate marketers just like you. And if you're ready to transform your marketing from buy this to be this, pick up my new identity marketing book available on my website at veronicaromney.com. Until next time, my friends, keep making it rain.